think we shall start. I just wanted to introduce Chris. Chris Lang is the owner and the founder of Flash Accounts, and he also sits on the MAAG advisory board. So we're very thankful that he's taken some time today to answer your questions. And I'd just like to pass it over to Chris.
Thanks, Terry. Morning all. I hope you're all keeping well in these unusual circumstances. What we're going to do today is we're going to run through my take and my thoughts on where we are and what we can do to try and help protect businesses over the coming few weeks and months. This isn't comprehensive by any manner of means. It is my take on it. There's obviously quite a lot of movement and still a few unknowns that the government is getting through right now, but hopefully at least just gives a few hints and ideas of what we can do just to try and especially protect cash, which is going to be the key thing going forward. So I'll just run through a few of those thoughts and then I've got a couple of questions and if there are any more, I'll try and get through as many as we can. First things first is people and people costs. These are incredibly uncertain times for businesses, and this is usually the major cost within companies. There's been lots of talk about the job retention scheme, which the government set out on Friday, and more details became available over the weekend. It's important to point out that this is to protect jobs that may otherwise be lost rather than a general support for people who are working from home. The key word that Chancellor used on Friday was furlough, meaning when people are laid off. That entails people being told not to work but retaining them on the books so that they're not made redundant. The government will cover 80% of their salary up to a maximum of £2,500. There's some uncertainty about whether the 80% applies to the 2,500 or the 2,500 is the maximum. Hopefully that will become clear in the next few days. That money is gross pay, so that is as if somebody was earning that in their gross pay. They would need to pay tax and national insurance on that. It seems as if employers' national insurance would still apply and also auto-enroll pensions as well. The process is that you would need to inform the employees that they are being furloughed and that they are not required to work during that period, and that is the key point, is they're not supposed to work. The government, HMRC, are currently putting together an online portal whereby once you've informed your employees, you should register those details on the HMRC portal. That's not currently live, but we're expecting that sometime this week. The next thing is salary reduction. A lot of the companies I'm talking to are considering this in terms of a blanket reduction of say 10 or 20% in salaries. This I think could be quite useful and hopefully not particularly painful for employees. They will be spending less money on travel and food costs whilst they're working from home. It's important to point out that this is something that needs to be done in agreement with employees rather than something that can be imposed. Their standard terms of employment still apply, so it would be a change in their contract, if you like. So it's really important to make sure that you have those people on board before you do that. Often in these circumstances, it is best to lead by example. It's easier to have that conversation if you can turn around to them and say, the owners and directors of the company have already taken a pay cut, and we're asking, in the interest of ensuring as many jobs as possible remain, that people follow suit. Clearly, there is the further option of reducing headcounts overall. I think in this moment in time, my advice has been to companies to do what you can this week to try and understand your future revenues. hard though that is, but the more clarity we have on that, the better we can understand what level of cost we need to get to in order to keep the business going. Tax, there was an announcement on Friday about VAT. That means that the next VAT payment you'd be due to make does not need to be paid, and that's automatic. The return will still need to be filed as normal, but you don't need to take any further action in terms of making a payment for that until later in the year. The assumption being that that will then become due towards the end of this year or the beginning of 2021, and certainly by the end of the tax year, so the 5th of April 2021. You could also consider whether to defer some of your other tax payments. The best advice is to try and speak to HMRC about this. We've had some advice from HMRC that they are suspending debt collection activities and are willing to defer conversations even about payment plans for the following month or two, or until we get through this particular period. But it is worth making sure you have logged a call with them and had that advice from them. But certainly PAYE, corporation tax, any other tax payments, you should try and defer through this period and try and protect that cash. The government seems to be being fairly robust about it in terms of, or fairly logical about it in terms of allowing people to do that deferment, but definitely make sure you put a call into them to make sure that is recorded. Rent, the next rent quarter is currently due as of today. I suspect a lot of companies will not be paying their rent this particular quarter. I think it is usually the second biggest cost to any company, and I think it is probably a wise thing to try and defer that payment. It is probably worth contacting your landlord to discuss that, but that's a matter of personal choice and depends on your relationship with your landlord. They may, if they are in a position to, allow you to take a payment holiday, but at the very least, I suggest asking for a deferment of the payment until later this year, say the last quarter of the year. I would then review the next quarter that's due on the 24th of June. Hopefully by that stage we are out of this current situation and hopefully returning to some form of normality, but I would keep that under review. Business rates, a lot of the grants are not available to companies in our world. They're mainly to do with companies in the retail and leisure sector and hospitality sector, but there are still some things we can do. The next round of rates payments are due to start on the 1st of April. They're usually paid over, the annual amount is usually paid over a 10-month period, so April to January. I know from personal experience that you can speak to the council and ask to change the payment dates, so they run from June to March. I suggest doing that, and if you're going to do that and you're paying by direct debit, to do it fairly much immediately, otherwise it'll be too late to stop that direct debit. I would suggest then that when it gets to about mid-May, and if the things are still tight, to contact the council again and ask for a further deferment. Insurances, it's worth checking your policies in case you are covered by any business interruption insurance. It is unlikely in my experience, but some people may have a business interruption insurance for which this covers. Unfortunately, usually that is more to do with damage to property rather than to situations like this. The one thing that's becoming slightly more clear, but is still not 100% clear, is the business interruption loans. So I'm going to talk through what I know about that, but I caveat that in terms of it's just becoming clear what the processes are and what is available. So these interruption loans are available to companies with a turnover of less than £45 million. They're accessible through about 40-ish different lenders, including high street banks. All the main banks are signed up to this. that's your first port of call, is to contact your bank. Most of them, I think, have or are putting up internet portals for the first instance in terms of applying. It applies not just to loans, but also to overdrafts and asset finance and invoice financing and other forms of business financing. They are loans available up to £5 million. They are interest free for the first 12 months, and the government will provide a grant for that interest plus any initial setup fees as well. The government will also guarantee 80% of the loan value, but note this is cover for the lender, not the borrower, so that if there was a default on these loans, the banks would go through their normal recovery processes first, and only if that didn't work would they be able to go to the government to get some relief on that. It's only available to companies that can prove viability, and that this is a short-term coronavirus-related issue to do with their working capital. The loans are available for repayments up to about 6 years, but the lenders are obliged to offer terms on normal commercial rates first and foremost, and if they're able to do that, to offer that first before resorting to this particular scheme. So those are my initial thoughts. What we have is I have a few questions that people have already sent in, and then I will open up to further questions through the chat portal here. So taking questions first, Chris from Wasserman. To get relief on team wages, we contact HMRC. Obviously, if you're furloughing them, yes, that applies. As I mentioned, there should be sometime this week an HMRC portal becoming available in this coming week. In terms of actually receiving the cash, you would need to pay out to these people first and then apply for a refund from HMRC. The indications currently are that that will start happening towards the end of April, beginning of May. So that will need to be factored into any cash flow planning that you have. But yes, there is a portal becoming available in order to try and apply for those refunds. Do we already know what qualification criteria are there? Any tips for navigation? So it is about people being furloughed and therefore not working. The outstanding question is, how can they prove it? I think the government would probably turn around and say, well, we have existing inspection regimes available if needs be. But it's worth pointing out that this scheme is made to help bar workers and waiters and the likes who literally cannot work and don't have the ability to work from home. So that's what the government will be concentrating on. Matt from Platypus has put some questions as well. If a bank is participating in the government business interruption loan scheme, what will they need from the applicant to proceed? This would be a normal process that you would go through in any situation where you're trying to borrow money from a bank. So yes, there would need to be P&Ls and balance sheets and the likes. There may well still need to be guarantees if the bank requires them as well, and securities put down in the normal process. There are, quite rightly, Matt, there are some other options available in terms of ES&E and IWOCA who do give payment loans to companies without going through quite so many hoops, but these are clearly going to be more expensive. The second question is, should we be offering clients terms like pay now and get 25% off of the total value? Basically early payment discounts. That is a commercial decision based on circumstances. bear in mind, whatever you offer has a direct impact on your margins, but it is a way to generate cash quickly. It is a judgment call based on individual circumstances and relationship with clients. Bigger clients are less likely to be able to have the mechanisms to do that, but it is something you could consider doing if you would like to. Right, I'm going to try and get through some more questions that have come through the chat. So there's still some questions coming through about furloughing. This is something that you can turn on and turn off as well, but the premise is that people who are furloughed are not working, whether that's internal or external work. If there isn't enough work for people to do, then I would suggest furloughing them. It may well be, we will eventually get through this. Work still needs to be done. One of my watch outs to clients has been, you know, remember your clients are still expecting you to produce work. It would be a terrible thing if clients are wanting to spend money with you and you reduce resource down to the level whereby that becomes too challenging. I think that we have to tread a very careful line of making sure we still have resource to service clients where they need to. But furloughing does not apply to people who are able to work from home. There's a question here, have I heard anything about prorating the amount of furlough time? That does not seem to be the case here. You're saying, this is Chris Wasserman, that may be happening in other parts of Europe, but that doesn't appear to be the case with this current scheme that we have in the UK, as far as I'm aware. We have one here from Lorraine. Got retainers with freelancers who are employed by their own limited companies. Has there been any movement or financial support for them, as technically they aren't being furloughed, as they aren't employed? No is the short answer to that. There is no further information. I suspect the government is working quite hard on this during the course of this week. It is practically more difficult for them to come up with solutions for this. It is easier to do the job retention scheme and easier to understand and put in place mechanics for that. I think they are trying to work through some kind of process to provide support for freelancers over and above the job seekers allowance and other benefits that have been announced. But I would watch this space this week. I'd expect sometime by the end of this week to be some announcement on freelancers. That seems to have covered most of the questions. If I've missed a question, can we retype them so I can try and make sure I've answered as many as possible?
Does anyone else have questions? Just pop them in the chat if you have anything else you'd like to ask Chris, because obviously he's on you know, a very tight schedule, as you can imagine. So any more questions, we'll wait just a minute, and if not, I'll just say a few words before we end the webinar. Thank you very much, Relaine. We're trying our best to serve the independence agency community. So thank you for all your thanks. I can see going through the chat there.
If people do have subsequent questions, I'm more than happy for Terry to provide my contact details, and I will get back to you as soon as I can with whatever answers I do have.
Yeah, sure. And guys, please look at our website. We are opening up our services to the whole independent agency community in these extraordinary times. And we just want you guys to get involved, and we're going to try and help you guys as much as we can. And thank you very much to Chris for your time. I'm sure everyone found that very, very useful. And remember that we've got the Agency Leaders virtual drinks this Friday, hosted by none other than Spencer Gallagher. So please join us for that. And thank you very much for your time again, Chris.
Okay, thank you.